We're going to give you the top 5 books that we actually read in the property industry.
I'd like to actually encourage you guys to not only just read, but take it a step further and implement.
History of money, right? So now, in order to know how to actually position yourself, you need to look at what has happened in history.
I always emphasize, man, that this car of ours of property investing, it's actually run by 2 funnels.
Okay.
Your estate agent and your sourcing deals. If you've got experts, if you've got people that bring results, do not be afraid to pay a premium price for them.
And for number 1, right?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You are tuned into Non-Wealth.
And if this is your first time tuning into Non-Wealth, we are actually property investors. Before we even start there, I'm Lebu.
And my name is Neo.
Yes, as I was saying, we are actually property investors in the property market, actually implementing the things that we actually talk about, right?
True.
So now this is content that we actually push on a day-to-day basis.
Before we even get to the content, man, I'd like to say and actually show my appreciation towards our subscribers and people that are actually interacting with us, guys. We appreciate it so much, and let's keep up the great work.
Yes, so now we're going to give you the top 5 books that we actually read in the property industry, right? So now we're going to do a countdown from number 5 all up to number 1.
Because this was one of the frequently asked questions, guys. Which books have you read, or which books do you recommend, so that I can read and implement? Before we even talk about this, man, I'd like to do a confession.
Confess.
You know, I never used to read so much, man. What I used to do is that Lebza used to be the reader. I used to listen to him so much, but I used to store whatever he'd tell me. I'd store it, and then I'll go to my friends and tell them all about this book that he read, and I'll be sounding like the smart guy. But then I knew that this has to come to an end, man.
He was shooting himself in the foot, man.
So things have changed, and now I've actually started reading. So now I'd like to actually encourage you guys to not only just read, but take it a step further and implement, because that's what will make you different.
Yes, because now what we actually, sorry about that.
No, I'm done.
Sorry about that.
I'm done with my confession.
So now what we're actually saying is that there is no use of having a large book pile, right? Without actually implementing the things that you've read, right? So now what we will be talking about, we won't give you a book summary of what the books entail, right? We're going to actually tell you what we learned from the book and how we actually implemented that into that book.
True. So we'll be highlighting that key point that we actually got our takeaway from that book, so that it might bring value to you, or when you're reading about it, you can actually link it to the practicals of investing in property.
Okay, so now number 5.
This is one of my favorite books, man. This is one of my favorite books, The Richest Man in Babylon. My takeaway from it was that you have to invest our savings. So it basically breaks down that if we should be saving 10% of your salary, by the end of the year, you will have a whole month's salary. By the end of the year, you will have a whole month's salary. So what you can do with that saving is you can invest it in something that will bring cash flow. You shouldn't invest to buy a liability. I think we should invest to rather buy an asset, and then that asset will actually afford your lifestyle. That's actually how we apply this rule.
Of course. And then what I had learned, right, and what we actually implemented, right, is to borrow other people's money, right? But now in borrowing other people's money, this is a very disciplined thing that you have to actually implement within your life, right? But there they actually go in deep on how you actually need to pay back the people's money, right? But now when borrowing other people's money, you become richer as a community rather as alone. And we know that in the property industry, that's what's really important, right? Using other people's money. Okay, in property, we know that when you're borrowing other people's money, right, you're actually able to progress faster than you would if you were only using your money. So now that was the lesson that I took from The Richest Man in Babylon.
Number 4,
we talked about selling with the story, right? Selling with the story. So now what you're saying about selling in the story, right? When you're talking about selling with the story, you're actually thinking about how to actually negotiate the particular thing that you want to sell, right? So now in selling with the story, they actually talk about how to actually sell, right, in your script, right? Because we all know that people that sell have scripts, right? So now in the script, you actually need to have a story to make it engaging for someone who doesn't know, right? So now if I'm going to sell Neo on something, right, I need to be able to have a story that will help him to relate to the product that I'm selling, so that he can actually buy from me.
selling with a story. For me, my takeaway for selling with a story was that you have to handle objections. You have to handle objections beforehand. So what this does is that you actually do research before you actually sell. So how do I link this with property? Is that when I go to an investor, I have to think about all the possible objectives, whereby when I'll be presenting my deal to the investor, I would have already answered these objections, because now it becomes a problem whereby you have too many questions and I wasn't clear on this. So how I'll do this is I'd start implementing and get research and find out what objections can I kill before I actually do the closing.
Yeah, man, that's right. Because now sometimes it happens that, no, I remember all the objections that I think about, right? I think that the best way of doing it, right, is writing it down. When someone actually objects on your product, right? Or say for instance, you're going to someone and presenting a property deal, right? And they object your product, right? So now you need to be able to write it down and see on how, if the next person actually gives you that objection, how are you actually going to handle it? Or even better yet, how do you handle it before the person objects?
It's so interesting that once you get used to handling objections, you actually find out that there's not so many objections out there. Objections are more or less the same. So once you are able to actually conquer these objections, your pitch will be perfect. Number 3, we have
the real book of real estate. What I learned, it's the real estate due diligence. On the real estate due diligence, he talked about the 5 things that you actually need to look out for within that property, right? So now he talked about physical review, he talked about title review, he talked about legal review, he talked about third party reports review, and he talked about accounting and tax. So now this is why we're always telling you guys that you need a power team, right? You need a team to actually thrive within the property industry, right? So now without a team, it becomes actually hard for you guys to actually thrive within property, because now you won't know everything within property. I think we said this in the past 2 videos, right? You can't actually know everything within the property industry. So now you need a team, and now this team needs to be the best team, because now if it's not the best team, it's going to be a problem for you.
My takeaway from this book in particular is how to protect profits by focusing on your market. So when we're speaking about focusing on your market, this is actually a key point for even people that are actually beginning, in the beginner stage.
Okay.
Because I mean, it focuses on your research market before going into the deal, knowing what you're putting yourself into, because you do not want to find yourself in a market that you were not anticipating, guys. This is problems. So now what do we entail when you're talking about doing research on your market is that you have to find out how much the rent average is around that area.
Yeah.
You have to more or less estimate the salary levels, and you also have to find out the target market, because you know in some cases you'll be dealing with students. Some cases you'll be dealing with people who are actually the elderly people, and some cases you do not want to find yourself in the wrong market. So I emphasize that it's actually important that you focus on your market research before going into a deal.
I mean, the last thing that you'd want to do is to go into a market, right? And you do not really understand what's going into the market, but only to find out that you're dealing with real people, man. Dealing with real people. I don't want to deal with those, right? We all know what we're talking about, right? So now, what you want to do before you actually go into a market, before you buy a property, right? You actually want to know what the market has for you. Are you going to be able to deal with the people that are living in that particular property?
As we move on to book number 2, we're getting there. What I'd like to emphasize before we even jump into book number 2, guys, please take off your political hat, guys, because I know this one is political. Some of you are like, nah man, I don't even want to hear about that, but let's not waste time. Book number 2 is Trump Strategies for Real Estate. Man, this one is deep, man. This one for me is deep. What I got from this is get help from the best real estate specialist, man. This one said is that what I saw about this is that you shouldn't actually be afraid to pay a premium if you've got people within your circle that will be doing the job. For instance, a real estate agent, if you'll be paying a premium price, we're talking about maybe, so somebody can think, why are you paying this guy with so much money? If this person will be bringing results to your company, I don't see a reason why you should be having a problem with paying a premium price for that.
Say for instance, when we're dealing with estate agents, right? If you have the best estate agent in your corner, right? You know that the property will sell as soon as possible, right? If it's going to sell within 1 month with that particular estate agent and they're asking for 8%, right? That's actually sweet. That's a sweet deal. Other than having a 3% and having to keep your property for the next 5 months.
I always emphasize, man, that this car of ours of property investing, it's actually run by two funnels.
Okay.
Your estate agent and your sourcing deals. If you've got experts, if you've got people that bring results, do not be afraid to pay a premium price for that.
Okay, let's go to what I learned, right? I learned the 5 personalities that you have to have as a property investor, right? I mean, some of them you might not have them right now, right? But what I've noticed is that the more you actually do something, the better you become at it, right? So say for instance, negotiation, right? So at first you'd be like, no, I don't want to negotiate with someone, right? But now as time goes on and you actually keep on empowering yourself with the information, right? You start realizing that you become a closer, right? So now the 5 personalities that he talked about actually preparing before the meeting, right? This is actually writing down the things that you would want to know, because now you don't want to get to a meeting and end up forgetting what you have to ask, right? And then when you get home and you're like, oh my god, why didn't I ask that question, right? So now you always need to write down what you need to know, right? You always need to write down the questions that you want. You always need to write down what will make this deal sweet for you.
Negotiation is more about how do I add value to your life. So if you know that I'll be adding value to this person's life this way, it will actually make the negotiation process quite sweeter.
Yeah, and for number 1, right?
This is the best, man. It goes without saying. I think you know it.
Man, this has been in your eyes the whole time, right? This is the book that we're talking about, right?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad, Poor
This
Dad,
book
man.
caused havoc, man. This book changed the career path, man. We studied governance all the way until honors level until we read this book. This book changed everything. This book put us in property, guys. Hence, we are so obsessed with property, man. It's because of this book, man.
Okay, so now for number 1, right? What I learned is the history of money, right? So now in order to know how to actually position yourself, you need to look at what has happened in history, right? So now say for instance, you're looking at the 2008 crash, right? So now you see what trends were there when there was the crash, right? Everybody was selling their houses. A lot of people were actually laid back in terms of, I'm not going to invest in the market, right? But now looking fast forward, a lot of people actually made a lot of money within 2008. Why? Because they actually bought the houses when they were low. I mean, this is having a sale. I mean, I think on the book it actually says that when there's a sale for shoes, when there's a sale for clothes, we actually run to the shops, right? But now when there's a sale for property, we actually go back, right? This is the time to actually strike.
This reminds me of somebody actually on social media was saying that everybody was like buy low and sell high before things were this bad, and now that things are actually low, why isn't everybody buying?
We're not talking about buying low and selling high now.
So what my takeaway from this book is that why we need to actually learn about financial literacy. If you look at the property game, you'll actually learn so much from this book in terms of how to enter, because sometimes somebody will think that I need so much money to actually get, or property is for rich people. Now reading this book, you actually get to open your mind and think about what are the various ways that I can get into property without having so much money. How can I use other people's money? How can I use joint ventures? Or how can I actually source deals so that I can put myself on the property map? So financial literacy is very important, because it doesn't only look at your entry level, it also looks at how do I sustain, how do I scale up. This book is powerful, man. I won't end if I continue talking about this book.
And that was our top 5 books that we actually implemented within real estate, right? I mean, it would be an injustice to end off the session without speaking about our sister,
Valerie Ramezi. She published about 5 books within a year, guys. My perspective. Talk about consistency, talk about hard work, guys. It's all about perspectives, about relationships, loving yourself and loving family.
And what I like about that book, it doesn't only speak about having relationship with other people, it also speaks about really having a relationship with yourself, having a healthy relationship with yourself.
Guys, let's read. We will post the link below if you're interested in it.
Thank you for subscribing, and if this was your first time and you haven't subscribed, please be sure to click that subscribes.
Subscribe.
And give us a thumbs up, man.
Guys, with all that said, I emphasize that it's pointless to read all these books and then we have a meeting and then we talk about, hey man, did you hear about the 8 strategies? Or did you see the 5 sales negotiating skills? It's pointless, guys. Let's implement. I'd emphasize on implementation phase, guys. Let's implement.
Implement.
Let's
Nongwell.
signing out.